Welcome, beloved friend. This testimony is one of those rare stories that stirs the soul, a moment that challenges what we thought we knew and opens our eyes to the transforming power of Jesus. As you watch, take a moment to let each scene sink in. Feel the weight of the story, the breakthrough, and the undeniable grace that changes everything. My name is Layla. When I turned 12, I started seeing things that confused my young heart. We lived in a massive palace somewhere in the Gulf region, where my family controlled wealth from oil that seemed endless. Every morning, I woke up in a room bigger than most houses, with silk sheets and servants waiting outside my door. But something felt empty inside me. My father was a powerful man with a long beard and eyes that never smiled. My mother moved quietly through the halls, always looking down, never speaking unless spoken to. I had 3 older brothers who could do whatever they wanted, but my 2 sisters and I had to stay hidden, covered, perfect. The palace had marble floors, golden decorations, and fountains in every courtyard. Yet I felt like a prisoner in a beautiful jail. Every day started the same way. The call to prayer echoed 5 times, and we all had to stop whatever we were doing. I prayed because I was told to, not because I understood why. My father taught me to memorize words in Arabic, tracing his finger across the pages as I repeated them. But when I asked what they meant, he told me not to question, just obey. That word, obey, followed me everywhere. Obey your father. Obey the rules. Obey tradition. Never ask why. I watched my older cousin Rashid, who was 26, visit our palace often. He had sharp eyes and a smile that made me uncomfortable. He would stare at me during family gatherings, and the adults would whisper and nod. I did not understand then what they were planning, but I felt afraid. My stomach would twist every time he came near. One afternoon, I overheard my uncle telling my father that I would make a good wife for Rashid when I was older. My heart stopped. I was just a child. But in their world, girls were not children for long. We were property to be traded, pieces on a game board to keep wealth and power in the family. By the time I was 14, I started noticing things that made my faith shake. My uncles were strict about religion with us, telling my sisters and me to cover completely, to never laugh loudly, to never look at boys. But I saw these same uncles drink alcohol in secret rooms, heard them laugh about their wealth, and watched them treat their wives like servants. One uncle had 4 wives, and I saw how miserable they all looked, competing for his attention, their eyes dead. My Aunt Fatima lived in our palace too. She was married to my father's brother, her own cousin. I watched her cry in the garden one day after an argument. Her face had a bruise, and when I asked my mother why nobody helped her, she pulled me close and whispered that this was just how life worked for women in our family. That conversation changed something in me. I started keeping a small diary hidden under my mattress, writing my questions in it. Why did God want women to suffer? Why was it okay for men to hit their wives? Why did we have to marry our cousins? That last question haunted me most. I learned that many marriages in our family happened between cousins to keep the bloodline pure and the money together. But it made me sick to think about. I had seen the children born from these marriages, some of them struggling with health problems, some of them seeming different. Nobody talked about it, but I noticed. I also noticed how the girls married young, sometimes at 15 or 16, to much older cousins. Their weddings were celebrations for everyone except the brides, whose eyes looked empty and scared. I started hiding books that my brothers brought home from their schools abroad. They could study anywhere, learn anything, but I was only taught religion and how to run a household. In one book, I read about other countries where women could choose their husbands, go to school, work, speak freely. It seemed like a fantasy world. In another book, I found a story about a man who taught love and forgiveness instead of rules and punishment. I did not know who he was, but those words stuck with me like a seed planted in dry ground. When I turned 16, my father called me to his office one evening. The room was dark with heavy curtains blocking the sunset. He told me to sit down, and my heart raced because his voice was serious. He placed a photograph on the desk between us. It was Rashid, my cousin, now 30 years old, dressed in expensive clothes with that same uncomfortable smile. My father explained that Rashid had formally asked for my hand in marriage. He said it was time for me to prepare to be a wife, that this marriage would strengthen our family and keep our wealth safe. I felt like the walls were closing in. My hands started shaking and my voice came out small and weak when I said I did not want to marry him. My father's face turned dark red. He stood up, towering over me, and told me I had no choice in this matter. He said I was being selfish and disrespectful, that every woman in our family had done her duty and I would too. When I tried to explain that marrying my cousin felt wrong, that it made me sick to think about, he slapped me across the face. The sting shocked me more than hurt me. He had never hit me before. That night, I cried until I had no tears left. I wrote pages and pages in my diary, asking God why He made me a girl in this family, why I had to suffer for traditions I did not choose. My mother came to my room and sat on my bed, stroking my hair. She told me she understood my fear but that I would learn to accept it like she had, like every woman before me. She said Rashid would provide for me and protect me. But I did not want his protection. I wanted freedom. The next months were torture. Rashid started visiting more often, bringing me gifts I did not want. He would sit too close, touch my hand, tell me how beautiful I would look as his wife. My skin crawled every time. During family dinners, everyone acted like this was wonderful news, congratulating my father on arranging such a good match. Only my youngest sister seemed to understand my pain. She was 10, and she would sneak into my room at night and hold my hand, both of us crying silently. When I turned 17, I made a terrible mistake. During a family gathering, Rashid tried to kiss my cheek in front of everyone, and I pushed him away. The room went silent. My father grabbed my arm and dragged me out, his fingers bruising my skin. He took me to a small room in the old wing of the palace, a place with no windows and bare stone walls. He told me I would stay there until I learned respect and obedience. The door locked behind him with a heavy click that echoed in my chest. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. We'd be honored to have you join this growing community of seekers and truth lovers. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from and share how this journey speaks to your heart. Your thoughts, reactions, and reflections help spark the kind of conversations that inspire faith, healing, and deeper understanding. Days blurred together in that room. A servant brought me food twice a day but was forbidden to speak to me. I had nothing but a thin mattress, a prayer rug, and a copy of the Holy Book. The silence pressed down on me like a weight. I prayed the way I was taught, but the words felt hollow. I read the religious texts searching for answers, but all I found were rules about women obeying men, about punishment for disobedience. I found nothing about the love I was hungry for. My mother visited once, crying and begging me to apologize to Rashid and my father. She said I was breaking her heart, that I was bringing shame to the family. But I could not apologize for not wanting to marry my own blood. After 2 weeks, my father brought Rashid to see me. They stood in the doorway, and Rashid spoke in a voice that pretended to be kind but sounded threatening. He said I would be his wife whether I wanted it or not, that I should make peace with my fate. I turned my face to the wall and refused to look at him. The isolation lasted a month. By the end, I felt like I was disappearing. My body grew thin because I barely ate. My skin became pale from no sunlight. I scratched at my arms when the anxiety got too bad, leaving marks I would carry forever. I stopped writing in my diary because I had nothing new to say. Every page just repeated the same desperate questions. Why this life? Is there really a God who cares? One afternoon, a new servant came with my food. Her name was Amira, and unlike the others, she looked at me with kind eyes. She was older, maybe 50, with gentle hands and a sad smile. The next day, she came back and whispered quickly that she knew someone who helped women escape bad situations. My heart jumped. She said my family was planning a trip to Europe in a few weeks for business, and if I was patient, she might be able to help me then. I grabbed her hand, tears streaming down my face, and nodded. The punishment ended after that month. My father let me out but watched me constantly. I pretended to be broken, to be obedient. I apologized to Rashid, though the words tasted like poison. I smiled at family dinners and acted like a good daughter. Inside, I was planning. Amira would sneak into my room late at night with information. She told me about organizations in Europe that protected women like me, about how I would need to be brave and quick when the moment came. The trip was planned for early spring. We would fly to London for my father's business meetings. I packed carefully, hiding my diary and a few small items I could not leave behind. Amira managed to slip some clothes and a little money into my luggage without anyone noticing. The night before we left, I could barely sleep. My mind raced with fear and excitement. What if it did not work? What if they caught me? But what if I succeeded? What if I could actually be free? The flight was long. I sat between my mother and sister, pretending to read while my heart pounded. London appeared below us, gray and rainy and beautiful. We landed and went to an expensive hotel. My father had meetings and my mother wanted to shop. Amira worked as part of our servant staff on the trip. On the second day, while my family was busy, Amira told me the time had come. She handed me a bag with different clothes and an address written on paper. She hugged me, told me to be strong, and created a distraction by spilling something in the hotel lobby. I slipped away during the confusion. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the paper with the address. The London streets were crowded and confusing. I had never been alone in public before, never walked without a male family member or servant. Everything was overwhelming. The noise, the people, the freedom. I found a bathroom in a shopping center and changed out of my traditional clothes into jeans and a sweater Amira had packed. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I had always been covered. Now I saw my own face, my own hair, my own shape. Following the directions, I found the address. It was a small community center run by a church. A woman named Margaret answered the door. She had gray hair and warm eyes, and when I started crying and trying to explain in broken English that I had run away, she pulled me inside and held me like a mother. She did not ask many questions that first day. She just gave me tea, a blanket, and a safe place to sit. That night, I slept in a small room with a clean bed. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But I also felt guilty. I thought about my mother's face when she would discover I was gone, my sister's confusion, my father's rage. I knew they would search for me. I knew the danger I was in. Women who left our kind of family sometimes disappeared, brought back by force or worse. But I also knew I could not go back. I would rather die free than live as Rashid's wife. Margaret worked with a network that helped women escape forced marriages and dangerous situations. Over the next days, she connected me with people who could help. A lawyer explained that I could claim asylum, that forced marriage was illegal in this country. A counselor listened to my story without judgment. Slowly, I started feeling safer. They moved me to a shelter where other women were staying, women with stories like mine, women who understood. At the shelter, I met other women who had run from different kinds of darkness. Some had fled war, others abuse, others religious persecution. We shared meals and stories, cried together, encouraged each other. One woman named Sarah had escaped from a similar situation years before. She told me about her journey and how she found peace in her new faith. She mentioned Jesus, the name from that book I had read years ago. She said he offered love without conditions, forgiveness without end, freedom without chains. I was curious but scared. Everything I had been taught said that leaving my birth religion was the worst sin possible, punishable by death. But everything I had been taught also said I should marry my cousin and obey men without question, and I knew those things were wrong. So maybe I had been taught other wrong things too. Sarah gave me a book, a Bible, and told me I could read it if I wanted, no pressure. That night, I opened it carefully, afraid lightning would strike me. The words inside were different from anything I had read before. Stories about women treated with respect, about the poor being lifted up, about love that included everyone. I read about Jesus touching lepers that society rejected, eating with sinners that religious leaders condemned, defending a woman caught in adultery when men wanted to stone her. These stories made me cry because they felt like he would have defended me too. He would have said I mattered. He would have said I was more than property. Weeks passed. I kept reading, kept asking questions. Sarah took me to a small church service, and I sat in the back, watching. The people there seemed happy in a real way, not the fake happiness of my family's religious gatherings. They sang songs about freedom and love. A man spoke about how Jesus came to break chains, and I thought about my own chains, the ones I had run from and the ones still wrapped around my heart. After the service, several people welcomed me warmly. Nobody tried to force anything on me. They just offered kindness. One evening, about 2 months after my escape, I sat alone in the shelter's small garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. I held the Bible Sarah had given me, and I started talking out loud to Jesus, not sure if I believed yet but desperate enough to try. I told him everything. About the palace, about Rashid, about the fear and anger and confusion. I told him I did not know if he was real but that if he was, I needed him to show me. I needed to know that love like the book described actually existed. Something happened in that moment that I cannot fully explain. I felt warmth spread through my chest, like being hugged from the inside. Peace settled over me, quieting all the anxious thoughts that usually screamed in my head. I heard no voice, saw no vision, but I knew somehow that I was not alone anymore, that I was seen and loved. Tears poured down my face, but they were different tears. Not tears of pain but of release. Like a dam breaking inside me, washing away years of hurt. I went to Sarah and told her what happened. She smiled and explained that I could choose to follow Jesus, to accept his love and forgiveness. She said it meant turning away from my old life and starting new. I thought about what I would be giving up. My family, my culture, my safety if they ever found me. But I realized I had already given those things up when I ran away. And what I would gain, this peace, this love, this freedom, was worth any cost. So I said yes. I chose Jesus. The next Sunday, I was baptized in a private ceremony with just a few people there for safety. As water washed over me, I felt clean for the first time in my life. Not just physically but deeply in my soul. The pastor spoke about me being a new creation, about old things passing away. I thought about Rashid, about my father's anger, about all the rules that had suffocated me. In that moment I let them go. I forgave my family even though they did not ask for it, because holding on to anger was just another chain, and I wanted to be completely free. But freedom came with dangers I had not fully understood. About 3 months after my baptism, I received a message through the shelter. My family had hired people to look for me. They knew I was somewhere in London. Fear crashed over me like a wave. I had been careless, using my real name at the shelter, talking to too many people. Margaret and the others worked quickly to move me to a different location, a safe house run by people experienced in protecting women like me. The safe house was in a quiet neighborhood, and I shared it with 2 other women in similar situations. We could not leave often or carelessly. We kept curtains closed and doors locked. I changed my appearance, cutting my long hair short and dyeing it a different color. I used a new name, choosing Emma because it sounded soft and English and nothing like Layla. Every sound outside made me jump. Every knock on the door sent my heart racing. I had nightmares about Rashid finding me, about my father dragging me back. During this time, my faith was tested hard. I prayed constantly, asking Jesus to protect me, to hide me, to give me courage. Some days I felt strong and sure. Other days I sobbed on the floor, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. But in the darkest moments, I felt that same warmth I had experienced in the garden, that presence reminding me I was not alone. I read the Bible constantly, finding comfort in stories of people who had also run from danger and found God's protection. One of the women in the safe house, named Grace, became a close friend. She had escaped from a different country and a different kind of abuse, but we understood each other's pain. We prayed together, cooked together, encouraged each other on bad days. Grace had been living in hiding for 2 years and had built a new life slowly. She gave me hope that I could do the same, that this fear would not last forever. After 6 months in the safe house, things started settling. My asylum application was moving forward with help from lawyers who worked with refugees. I began taking English classes, improving my language skills. I volunteered at the church that had helped me, doing small jobs like cleaning or organizing donations. It felt good to be useful, to give back after receiving so much help. Slowly, I was building a new identity, not as Layla the princess, not as Rashid's promised wife, but as Emma, a survivor becoming a helper. The people at the church asked if I would share my story at a women's meeting. I was terrified but felt Jesus pushing me gently toward it. The night came, and I stood before about 20 women, my hands shaking, my voice weak at first. I told them about the golden cage I grew up in, about refusing the forced marriage, about escaping and finding Jesus. I talked about the fear that still followed me but also about the freedom I had found. When I finished, women were crying. Several came to hug me, telling me I was brave, that my story gave them hope. That experience changed something in me. I realized my pain had purpose. I could use what I had been through to help others. I started meeting with other women who had escaped similar situations, listening to their stories, praying with them, helping them feel less alone. Some were still deciding about faith. Some had already chosen Jesus. Some were angry at all religion. I tried to love them all without judgment, the way Jesus had loved me. I also started writing. At first just in my diary, processing my feelings and memories. But then I began writing articles for a website that shared stories of women who had left restrictive situations. I used my new name and kept details vague for safety, but I told the truth about the pain and the healing. Messages started coming from other women around the world, thanking me, asking for advice, saying they felt less alone. It was like my voice, silenced for so long, was finally being heard. Now, at 20 years old, I have been free for 3 years. I still live carefully, still look over my shoulder sometimes, still change locations when the organization helping me thinks it is necessary. My family never stopped looking, though their efforts have quieted. I heard through contacts that my mother cries for me often, that my sister asks about me. That knowledge hurts, but I cannot go back. Going back would mean death, either physical or spiritual, and Jesus did not set me free just to return to prison. My life looks nothing like the palace life I left. I live in a small apartment with simple furniture. I work part-time at a cafe and study at a community college, learning skills I will need to support myself fully one day. I attend church regularly, sitting with people who have become my new family. They know my story, they protect my identity, and they love me without wanting anything in return. This kind of love still surprises me sometimes. I think about my past often, but with less pain now. I can see how everything I went through, as terrible as it was, shaped me into someone who can help others. I understand the fear of leaving everything you know. I understand the weight of family expectations and cultural chains. I understand the courage it takes to question what you were taught and choose a different path. And I understand the incredible love of Jesus, who saw me in that palace, knew my pain, and made a way for my escape. The scars on my arms have faded but not disappeared. Sometimes I trace them with my fingers, remembering the girl who scratched at her skin in desperate anxiety. I am not that girl anymore, but she is part of my story. She is the one who survived, who ran, who chose freedom. I honor her bravery even as I celebrate how far I have come. The scratching stopped when I learned healthier ways to handle fear, when I learned to pray instead of panic. I have forgiven my family in my heart. Not because they deserve it or because what they did was okay, but because forgiveness freed me from bitterness. I pray for them sometimes, especially my mother and sister. I pray they will somehow understand why I left. I pray they will find their own freedom someday, though I know that might never happen. And I have forgiven myself for leaving them, for causing them pain, because I know now that saving myself was not selfish. It was necessary. Today, I woke up in my small apartment as sun streamed through my window. I made tea and sat with my Bible, reading about light shining in darkness. That is what my life feels like now. Not perfect, not without struggles, but filled with light after so many years of darkness. I smiled thinking about the girls and women I would meet with this week, other survivors who need to hear that escape is possible, that healing is real, that love exists without conditions. The fear still comes sometimes, usually at night when I hear unexpected sounds. But I have learned to speak truth to that fear. I remind myself that Jesus is with me, that I am not alone, that I am protected. I remind myself that I chose life over death, freedom over chains, love over law. And that choice, as hard as it has been, was the right one. I am no longer Layla the princess in a golden cage. I am Emma, a daughter of the King of Kings, and I am finally, truly free.